Okay, welcome everyone. Welcome, Alexandre. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Thank you for the invitation.
So we are now in the second day of the Futures Literacy Summit, and in partnership with Envisioning. And I'll just talk a little bit about Envisioning before we start. Envisioning is a foresight research institute, and we combine data visualization with mapping of emerging technologies to understand change and help the democratization of futures. And now I will introduce you, Alexandre. Alexandre Monnin holds a Ph.D. in philosophy from Paris 1, Sorbonne University, and is currently the scientific director of Origens Media Lab. He's the co-initiator with Diego Landivar of the Closing Worlds Initiative and the director of the Master of Science, Strategy and Design for the Anthropocene in partnership with Strate School of Design in Lyon. Today we'll be talking about zombie technologies and all the framework that initiated these ideas. And when you want, you can start your...
That's good for me. So thank you. Thanks a lot, Caroline, for having me here. Thank you. Thanks to all the people who've been organizing this and now watching us. So first of all, what I might do is that perhaps to give a bit of context behind those ideas I'll introduce. I will, if you will, discuss a schema that has been proposed quite recently by Bruno Latour to make sense of the Anthropocene and the period we are living in right now in his latest book entitled Down to Earth. In French, that's not the title, it's Où atterrir, which means where shall we land, which is a bit different with regards to the meaning of it. So I'll share my screen for a few minutes in order to show you one of the schemas that Latour is discussing in his book. So there we are. I think you should be able to see it right now. So the last schemas he's drawing in this book. I mean, he's advanced a lot of concepts already, but I would try to summarize what he's trying to hint at here, and I'll discuss it because that will be the background of my talk and of the very notion of zombie technology. So what Latour is trying to do is trying to create a compass for the people who are living as we are now in the Anthropocene, a political compass to make sense of what is happening right now, what was happening at least 3 years ago, because of course some things have happened in the meantime. And to do so, he's distinguishing between the local and the global, two attractors, which accounted for much of, let's say, modern history and the shift towards modernization. Meaning that we went from the local to something that was to be the global, with globalization, with the scientific revolution, the industrial revolution, maybe the managerial revolution, everything we have witnessed in the past 2 centuries and a half. And I would say we, of course, sometimes forcefully, the we here is always a contested notion, of course. That's one of the main criticism addressed to the very notion of the Anthropocene. And he's trying to explain that there are some new attitudes with regards to climate change, the crossing of the planetary boundaries, however you want to call them. One that was embodied according to him, by Donald Trump, was to ignore this perspective and just persist in the attraction of the global towards what he calls the out of this world attractor, meaning that continuing going on as if nothing had changed, as if the horizon was not marked by the presence of the Anthropocene and its consequences, means trying to stick to a world that we know is now obsolete, which is the world of the globe, which is the world of modernization. And so in order to make this world, have this world persist, whereas it's probably an illusion. And he tries to point that there is a new attractor that is now present and that we should do some politics towards this attractor. And that is the terrestrial, the Earth, but the Earth of the that's not the Earth of the globe. That's not the planet has something big that could absorb our development. That's rather the Earth of the critical zones, because it's quite frail, fragile, and that's something that is able to change under the activity of human beings in general, or maybe the human beings that have been part of the thermo-industrial civilization. I think it's a very interesting schema. I think it's very helpful to make sense of a lot of things that are happening right now. But what is also quite remarkable with regards to schema is that if you search for it, you won't find the Anthropocene on this schema, which is quite remarkable, I said, because Latour, of course, is one of the main thinkers of the Anthropocene. He's been very active in order to introduce it, not just to the social sciences, but since I'm French, he's been very active in 2015 during the COP21 in order to introduce this notion to all the people who've been part of the COP21 France in Paris. But yet the Anthropocene is nowhere to be found here. And two years before, Down to Earth, he had been publishing a book, Facing Gaia, which was precisely entirely dedicated to the Anthropocene. So it's important to make sense of that and to understand, maybe to comment on this schema and to understand that yes, one of our goals, and I'll go back to that later because that is directly linked to the notion of zombie technology. Our goals right now is to learn to be terrestrials. It's to learn to live in a different way on the critical zones. That's for sure. But at the same time, I have this tendency when I look at this schema to conflate attractor 2 and attractor 4, meaning the globe, and the out of this world attractor, because, well, somehow the globe always was something out of this world. The result of modernization was that we, or the people who were active in modernizing the world, which is not a we that encompasses all the people on Earth, of course, but these people, and being French, I'm part of this history, so I can say we, but that's a small we, somehow built a world that has no longer any future. And that's why the world of the globe was always already out of this world. And so it's true that we have to learn to live in a different way with on the critical zones to become terrestrials, like I said. But it's also true that whatever we want, we have to learn to live with the ruins of the globe. And my understanding is that, the globe is not just an illusion. It's not just an attractor, intellectual attractor. It's not just a result of a peculiar history. And dispelling that illusion will be the way out of it. That's not how it works, unfortunately. That illusion was made very concrete all the meaning of concrete, actually. It was made very concrete, very real. It was implemented, and it has become part of our world right now. And the our world, I say the we that I can say here, is truly the we of humanity, because this way of relating to the world has triumphed, unfortunately, almost everywhere. So it means that this illusion has been made real, and that we have to deal with the infrastructures of the globe. We have to deal with also the business models of the globe, the economy of the globe, and the sources of energy. I'll go back to that in a moment, that made the globe possible. And we cannot just dispel them out of intellectual means, by using just arguments. So there are two directions: becoming terrestrials, learning to live on the critical zones, having a new maybe cosmology that is very much true and really important. But at the same time, we have to inherit this development that created the globe. We cannot just escape it. Is everywhere. So somehow I will characterize the Anthropocene, uh, putting it back on this schema, by saying that the Anthropocene is the way that we have been, again, small we have been trying to create this globe. We have been trying to make this globe something out of this world, but from the start, I guess, there was a rupture with previous cosmologies, new and different use, and many elements that singularized this period by contrast to previous periods. And so we've been trying to have this globe lift from the Earth, and go in space somehow. But the thing is, we cannot sustain this endeavor. And now the globe is kind of collapsing on Earth, on the Earth of the critical zones. And that is precisely what is happening. And that is why we are living in the ruins of the globe. And we must deal at the same time with the failure of the modern project, which cannot be sustained for a very long time. 2.5 centuries is very short compared to the history of the Earth system. It's, of course, very short, even when compared to the history of human beings. So we have to deal with this perspective. And at the same time, we have to find new ways of learning to live on the critical zones in a different way. And the paradox, maybe the major paradox of all that, can be summarized by saying that something the coronavirus crisis makes very tangible again. We depend in a very short run on infrastructures, the infrastructures of the globe. We depend for our survival, daily survival, on corporations, organizations. We have to get the money. We need to eat, to pay our rents, do things like that. And many people are concerned by these perspective, because this kind of economy has now become globalized precisely. And at the same time, the very same infrastructures, models, organizations we depend on in a very short run are going to put our safety, global safety, at stake in the middle run. So that's what is sustaining us in a very short run is threatening us in the middle run. And that, of course, is one major problem. And what can explain the fact that it seemed possible for a short time to lift the globe literally over the Earth, to have it, run according not to the principles that govern the critical zones, but different principles, different economy, different metabolism, is precisely due to the fact there was some sort of Copernican revolution. I just want to say a few words about that to characterize what happened with the Industrial Revolution. Of course, the Copernican revolution predates the scientific and industrial revolution of the 17th and 18th century. But what I find interesting with this notion of the Copernican revolution is that you all know that Copernican revolutions means the shift from geocentrism towards heliocentrism. And one key thinker, philosopher, Immanuel Kant, has been mocked by some people, including Latour in particular, because he equated the Copernican revolution with precisely the opposite of that. For him, the Copernican revolution was the discovery of the subject of science, which was the subject and not the object. And he had everything revolving around the subject, which kind of, if you understand it, looks like the opposite of what Copernicus understood by the revolution that was at stake when he published his book. But I would like to say something about that, because somehow you can make sense of this Copernican revolution and understand that there was indeed a geocentric revolution going on, and that this geocentric revolution is what explains the Industrial Revolution and the development, the creation of the globe I have been talking about so far. Why is that? And I'll be very, very short, very quick. Well, some historians, economists, but interested in history, have been trying to characterize what happened with the Industrial Revolution. Edward Wrigley in the UK, Benoit d'Aviron, for example, in France. And I will borrow a distinction from Benoit d'Aviron, who's an economist and historian inspired by the work of Wrigley, who has been talking about this shift between the period that predates the Industrial Revolution and the Industrial Revolution. And he explains that at the same time we were, creating the globe, having this horizon dominated by the fourth attractor that Latour has been singling out, the out of this world attractor, there was a turn somehow to a kind of geocentrism. It's because of towards geocentrism that it was possible to have the globe lift over the critical zones, interestingly. Before that, before the advent of the Industrial Revolution, much of our energy came only from the sun, photosynthesis, muscular power, thanks to food, thanks to the energy of animals, so food and photosynthesis in the end. But that was the main metabolic regime at the time, what Benoit d'Aviron calls metabolic regime. So he's talking about a heliocentric metabolic regime. After the Industrial Revolution, even maybe a little bit before, but mainly after and during the Industrial Revolution, it was a shift thanks to the use of coal and later the use of oil to what he calls a mining metabolic regime, meaning that by exploring zones that we human beings did not inhabit underground, it was possible to find sources of energy which were really dense, and thanks to those sources of energy to power up new technologies, a new metabolic regime. And so it was possible to use all this energy to have the globe lift somehow, to make it real, but only for 2 centuries and a half. It will be difficult to sustain the globe for much longer than that. But it's interesting to understand this dialectic between finding the resources of the Earth, or rather the Earth as a planet, which you can dig into, and especially the underground resources of the planet, in order to build what was later to become, or at the same time, to become the globe and this out of this world attractor. So it was a kind of geocentric turn after heliocentric metabolic regime that was dominating at the time. And that's this geocentric turn, this kind of Copernican revolution in the Kantian sense of the word, that was instrumental in building the world we now live in. So the main question now is, what do we do with this situation? What do we do when the question is how we have to inherit the infrastructures, the economy, the business models, the laws that were tailored for the globe of globalization, this out of this world globe we now, for the most part, live in. So how do we inherit this? How do we advance towards models that are more in tune with the functioning of the critical zones? So two directions here, of course, and that's mainly something I'm trying to understand by talking of negative commons, understanding these realities we're inheriting as being negative commons. Maybe I will be able to say a few words later about that. And among these negative commons, there are all the technologies that we have been devising according to this mining metabolic regime. And these technologies can be characterized precisely as zombie technologies, meaning that there are technologies which are certainly not in tune with the functioning of the critical zones, technologies that are indexed on this fourth attractor, this out of this world attractor. And this is, there are zombie technologies. That's a term that I'm borrowing from a physicist, a French physicist named José Alloy. Well, sorry, he's not French, actually. He's working in France, but he's from Belgium. My bad. José has been putting forward this distinction between living technologies and zombie technologies in order to say something about digital technologies, but there are zombie technologies also outside of the realm of digital technologies. And to put it in a nutshell, zombie technologies are technologies that rely on a stock of resources and not renewable resources, technologies that function for a very short time, whether it's due to their natural obsolescence or to planned obsolescence or a mix between the two or whatever. And there are also technologies which are zombie because they cannot really die. They are undead, meaning that has waste. They last for millennia or even millions of years, precisely because they are made of resources that are not part of any biogeochemical cycle. And so they cannot, it's not a question of being recycled precisely, it's the opposite of that, but they cannot be taken care of with so-called natural means or living means. So they stay undead, living undead for a very, very long time. And those are, what I think is interesting here is that those are essential elements, whether you like digital technologies are a source of utopia, or if you believe that digital technologies are now sources of dystopia, which maybe is the looming horizon right now after the optimism of the years 2000, 2010. Well, whether you like them or not, in a nutshell, there are still zombie technologies. So maybe they are interesting, maybe they can be helpful in order to emancipate people, and that's open to discussion. But whether that is true or not, there are still zombie technologies. No question of use, of political destination of these technologies will change this fact. They are fundamentally not adapted to the Anthropocene and the period we are now entering. And so maybe that opens up the discussion to, well, negotiating what I call obsolete futures, futures which we believe were our future, future of smart technologies, smart cities, and IoT and things like that. Kind of sci-fi future, which was no longer sci-fi. That was to happen. And maybe that will not happen, or that should not happen, because precisely of the planetary boundaries, the Anthropocene, and the fact that we're in fact dealing with zombie technologies. So that opens up new possibilities for a discussion on technology, a democratic discussion about technology and the future. So maybe I'll stop here and I can precise a few points.
Thank you so much, Alexandre. It was very good to see all this context. I would like to know more about the negative commons, because it reminds me of a concept that I read some time ago in a newsletter called New World, Same Humans, that was about colonizing the future. So the idea that the same as the Western world colonized other lands, we are colonizing the future with our negative commons, maybe, or trash for this, from this time, the present.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for this question. I would say that actually the Western world did colonize itself at first. Even before colonizing others, it did. There was for example, the French Revolution is as much about freedom, emancipation, whatever, as it is, and against, of course, absolutism, as it is a fight between the countryside and the cities, and a fight between the Enlightenment and, of course, the old belief in, I don't know, witchcraft and magic and whatever in the countryside. So it's also something that happened on our territory. But yeah, so the notion of the negative commons is it's a notion I've been proposing 3 years ago in order to characterize the commons of the Anthropocene. When you think about the commons, broadly speaking, we have very positive elements in view. We think about rivers full of fish. We think about pastures, cows grazing somewhere in a greenland, whatever. Or we think, when we want to update the notion of the negative commons, we think about open source software, free software, open access, whatever, this kind of things. But the thing is, maybe the commons we will inherit in the Anthropocene will not be those kinds of commons. First of all, there is this idea that yes, we will inherit, toxic soils, rivers which are polluted, with no longer any fish, elements which appear and look like they're toxic, and already a lot of people are living with them. They are their commons, their negative commons, and we have to find new ways of dealing with them, not by saying that people have to, just live in the ruins of capitalism, and that's good, and that's I'm alluding, of course, to the subtitle of Annette Singh's book, which is a very good book, Mushroom at the End of the World. But this notion that people have to live in the ruins of capitalism is quite ambiguous, And actually, that's something that is very strong in contemporary crisis management. For example, in Fukushima and somewhere else, the new doctrine is that people are able to cope with their new environment. And so resilience, the goal is to make them resilient, or to help them be resilient. And so to leave where they are with all the problems they have and they're facing. And that is a new crisis management, which amounts to no management at all, or rather, people have to inherit this reality and to deal with it. The notion of the negative commons, first, that we have to do politics with these commons, not to let people deal with them in a way that is a managerial way, but that we have to deal politically with these sorts of realities. But actually, it extends to other aspects which do not appear to be obviously toxic, to be obviously ruins. My notion of ruins, because I've been talking about ruins in my presentation, is not, a picturesque notion of ruins, like romantic ruins, or even Nazi ruins, because the Nazis had a theory of ruins, quite crazy theory of ruins. My notion of ruins will be more akin to Walter Benjamin's notion of ruins, when he said that the bourgeois city is the real city in ruins. So what appears to be the norm, what appears to be, even the future, I mean, smart cities and things like that, are actually the real ruins. What is threatening our existence, and what will no longer hold in the future, what cannot be sustained in the future. And so we have to decipher behind the appearance of normality that these are ruins. A lot of our economic models are ruins. A lot of our business models are ruins. The supply chain is ruin. Everything we kind of inherit is now a ruin, because these elements are not tailored for the time we're living. They're asynchronous with regards to the time of living. It's like we know them, there's a sense of normality, but if we analyze how they can be sustained in the future, there is no normality. And if we also understand the history of these elements, of course, there is no sense of normality. There's a lot of violence behind that. So one of the questions now with the negative commons is to identify these commons, not as for me, I'm a philosopher, by telling people, okay, this is a negative commons or this is not a negative commons. But a real issue is rather for collectives to be able to identify realities that they believe are negative commons, and to request that these be treated as such, meaning that these collectives shall not be the only one to deal with these realities. They have to extend the community of the commons, because I know I have a smartphone. It's not with me here, but I do have a smartphone. Even though I resisted for a very long time. But I do have a smartphone. Well, having a smartphone means I'm in direct link who are almost treated as slaves in China, in some factories, people who are treated as slaves in Africa because they have to go underground, take the ore that is necessary to build my smartphone. So it's the smartphone itself as a technology might be understood as a negative commons because of all the suffering it implies, and the fact that this model will not hold for a very long time. It requires lots of energy in order to produce it, for its functioning, and it's typical of a zombie technology. I mean, it remains alive for 1 or 2 years, and then it is zombie trash for millions of years. So yeah, somehow the question is not to make these more sustainable or durable or whatever, because fundamentally they cannot be sustainable, and also from a moral and political point of view, you can have these elements, these zombie technologies, without having these people who are treated as slaves. So making that more durable, I don't think it's a very good idea. So the question is how we deal with such negative comments, how we politicize these comments in all their diversity. Yeah, that's a major idea. For example, with digital technologies, a lot of people believe there are comments. I, with other people, believe there are negative comments right now. And there is a political contest over the very definition, the balance of these comments, whether it is positive or whether it is negative, whether these technologies produce utopia or whether these technologies produce dystopia. That goes back to this concept I like of Mario Blazer and Maisel de la Cadena about the uncommons. The fact that before something can be treated as a commons, we disagree on what this reality fundamentally is. And I think digital technologies are an uncommons, and that there is a political strife over the definition of these commons, whether it's positive or negative. And I think that's the case for whole lots of realities right now. So it's one way to understand politics for the Anthropocene, to fight for the should I say recognition of these negative comments, and then to politicize the treatment of these negative comments, so that the collective affected by these realities are not the only one to take care of these realities. If you, I have an I can mention later, but yeah.
I see that Philip raised their hand. Maybe Galdino could just turn everyone into panelists so everyone could ask questions, but especially Philip that has their hand raised. Hello.
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 Hello, everybody. Thanks very much, Alexandre. Extremely interesting. Very. I've learned quite a lot of new things. I will probably engage with your work a bit from now on. Thanks very much for that. I just have a question that relates to something that you said about that you don't have a smartphone and you try to avoid it, and because you consider smartphones and if I understood correctly, digital technologies as negative comments. I think what I see as problematic here is that even these platforms that we are communicating through and we are using on a daily basis and we are surrounded by, and that are kind of indispensable part of our daily lives, and it's very, very difficult to just go back to the forest and write on a typewriter nowadays. And it doesn't really matter if you have Huawei, Samsung, Apple. It's all manufactured by Foxconn, or 95% of that, as we know. But what I'm really going to is that we are opening or reopening old questions about the relationship between capital and labor, and I would be wondering whether, for instance, the COVID crisis that we are going through, whether this might have been an interesting opportunity to rethink new kinds of utopias that would tackle and reconfigure the relationship between labor and capital. And it just seems to me that it's another missing revolution. I would be curious what you think about that. Thank you. Thank you very much for a very interesting talk.
Thank you. Thank you for this. Thank you for this question. I fully agree with you that it's my point is not to moralize by saying that people who have or use digital technologies are bad people. For example, in France, to access our healthcare, now we will need in the future, but there are some experiments going on already, we'll need a smartphone, because it used to be a public service, but now everything will be dematerialized, rematerialized, digitized, and you will need a smartphone. So I'm not going to, of course, chastise who will use a smartphone for their healthcare, and I'm one of them, of course. But the thing is, which is interesting, is we are going in the wrong direction, I think. That's the main thrust of my talk here, because these truly are zombie technologies with a use of energy that is getting higher and higher over the years. I think the increase of the energy use of digital technologies. I've been myself the co-author of the report on this element entitled "Towards Digital Sobriety" by the Shift Project. It's an increase of 9% per year of energy use, which is absolutely enormous. If you look at a curve, it's absolutely enormous. And somehow we are making ourselves more dependent on these technologies, which I am as well, and a lot of people. And at the same time, we begin to understand that this might not be a good idea. There is, of course, some, I don't like to talk of negative externalities, because as Marx himself understood 2 centuries ago, the fact that Foxconn is building those smartphones is not a negative externality. It's part of the business model. It's fundamentally part of the business model. So it's not something you can treat, as an accident. It's an essential part of the business model. And the question is how we deal with that. So to know that there are those diverging paths entering the Anthropocene, becoming more dependent to digital technologies. And I think more and more, especially in France, but in France we have the collapse movement. We are always very pessimistic about the future, so it helps to understand those things. We understand that it's a bad idea, but getting less dependent on these technologies is extremely difficult. I will give just one example, which I think makes us understand very well how tough it is to understand. I mean, notions like post-growth or degrowth or things like that, which I'm okay with. I think it's very interesting, but we have to understand and pinpoint the real difficulties that we are facing before we get there. There was a recent war between Armenia and Azerbaijan. Interestingly, the conclusion of this war and the win of Azerbaijan was that from a military perspective, this country has been using drones that have been unmanned. I don't know how you call them you understand when I say drone, you understand what I mean? Or yeah, okay, great. So there's an acronym like unmanned, whatever. They have been using drones, which completely disrupted the conflict and got them the upper hand, and the triumph through the use of these drones. And so drones, basically, that's digital technology, right? It's not something different. And so if you want to tell, like, the person who's using his or her smartphone to get access to his or her healthcare services, or if you're telling an army, okay, we should no longer use digital technologies because that's really bad, which it is, but it gives an immediate advantage to any hostile power. So that explains why we're very much entangled within these technologies, how difficult it is to get out of there. But instead of, and I think these are not problems that interest people who are, from the degrowth movement and just talking about the army, the military. It's just not their universe. It's not just their cosmology. But I mean, that's a very concrete topic. I wouldn't come to people in an army and talk about them. Okay, we have to relinquish digital technologies and not understand they're problematic, not understand what their difficulties are facing. But I would say instead of understanding this as the last word of the discussion, like, okay, it's really tough, so it's not possible. So we have to ignore that, because ignoring the fact that we will no longer be able to sustain these technologies for a very long time means we'll face other problems we are not necessarily seeing right now, but real difficult problems. And so we have to take this situation where it's really tough to escape individually these technologies, or as an institution or a collective, especially the army here, it's very difficult to escape these, to relinquish these technologies, as the starting point of our reflection, how we may inherit this dependence on these technologies, and how we may deal with the fact that we cannot, and a lot of people don't want to do that anyway, relinquish them from one night to the next day. But we have to develop new knowledge in order to cope with the situation in the short run, in the middle run, but still with this perspective that we will not be able to sustain that the globe and its technologies for a very long time. So we have to deal with various imperatives which are really tough. And to go back to your question, maybe not answering it, because of course the relation between capital and labor is a very important question. I would say there is maybe just about that, there is an element that is missing when we're discussing the relationship between capital and labor, often managerial elements. The fact that yes, there is capital labor relationship between the two from an economic and perspective and political perspective, but there is also a third element, which is the fact that we are now mainly living in the world of organizations, businesses, and not just businesses, because states are treated as organizations. Even the law is treated as, from an economic and managerial perspective more and more. And so we have to shift to a different cosmology where the dominating element is not the organization, because we can see right now with the crisis that if those organizations fail, billions of people, the lives of billions of people is at stake. So this dependency on this form of organization for our very, living is, of course, a problem. At the same time, just as I said earlier, we cannot simply negate their existence. Even the people, of course, from the degrowth movement or from the left, they don't want to hear about organizations like corporations, companies. That's horrible. But these are, I would say, negative comments we have to deal with. That's our negative comments in the West that we have put everywhere around the world, meaning the people who were not dependent on organizations, they had different modes of organizing and institutions and earning their living, now depend on organizations which are really fragile when a crisis like the one we're living in happens. So that makes them even more fragile than before. So yeah, we have to deal with those realities. How can we criticize them? How can we imagine getting out of this dependency on organizations? And at the same time, take into account that we cannot do that overnight. Otherwise, billions of people will die. That's as simple as that. So yeah, it's tough questions, but I think we have to ask these tough questions and find new means of actions in order to face them.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
If someone else wants to say something, just unmute yourself. We can. No other questions.
I think there's a question in the chat. Maybe I can try to. So considering, yeah, please.
Consider that technology development moves faster than political dialogue and decision making. How can we nudge these uncommons in preferred direction? Yeah. Who has authority to enforce it?
Well, that's a very interesting question, because I don't know that technology developments moves faster. When we, for example, we're talking about IoT, the Internet of Things, we're talking about technology that goes back 40 years ago. I'm 40 right now. It was my birthday yesterday. So I'm almost has IoT, ambient, computing, things like that. It's just that it takes a while to have these technologies being industrialized and to become a product that is sellable on the market. But we're still talking about new technologies, which are 70 years old, which is kind of weird when you come to think about it. So I'm not sure. We are, that was an idea of Bernard Stiegler, the late Bernard Stiegler, whom I knew because I've been working for him for 3 years when I was a PhD student. Had this idea that the technical system was always disrupting other systems, political system, legal system, whatever. But a problem with this view is that it somehow naturalizes what is happening, this so-called disruption by the technical system. Bernard was asking us, for example, with regards to digital technologies, especially smart cities, in his last book. He was asking us to imagine a different use for smart cities, because he did not believe it was possible to just stop the advance of smart cities. It is true that we generally do not think in terms of not making a technology happen, avoiding that the technology becomes a product and imposes itself on our lives. But I think we need to produce new knowledge about what we call this innovation within the Closing Words project. There are two directions for this project. We need to learn how we may inherit the past, the infrastructures of the past. And I've been talking mainly about that. But we also need to inherit those already obsolete futures which will take place. For example, smart city, I would say, is already an obsolete idea, but since it has been, an innovation for a very long time, it will happen because companies are expecting growth out of because people who decide from political perspective are convinced that this is, a new source of growth, and it's the only way that counts, without looking at really the quality of the growth that is thus produced. But I will say we have to inherit those futures in a different way, and probably we have to learn how we can make them not happen, and most of them not happen, because however we put it, we will not be able to absorb all these futures, will not be able to absorb all these developments. So we have to learn this new skill of this innovating. Inheriting those futures has negative comments that do not exist already and should not actually exist. We cannot negotiate with the existence of organizations, business models, the fact that we have this mining metabolic regime I've been talking about. But we can certainly negotiate when it comes to innovations that yet haven't really happened. And that has happened. If you, I think it was this year or the last year, a big project about a smart city in, what was it, in Canada? Was it in Ottawa, whatever? I don't remember the town, the city, but was abandoned. Something that, if you're Bernard Stiegler and say, okay, we have to find different use for these technologies because technology basically imposes itself and it's a pharmacon So maybe we'll, from something toxic, we'll make a remedy. If you think about zombie technologies, it will never be a remedy. It might be good for some people. Probably it will be at the same time bad to other people, people working at Foxconn, people excavating the earth to find the ore, but it will never be good for everyone. And of course, that's part of the problem. So there are examples of projects that do not happen, and we have to learn from these examples, I would say.
I see. And I also think that initiatives such as this Futures Literacy Summit also might help people to just question and think about futures, to be able to decide for themselves or think, because yes, we are living in a very techno-utopic society where everything that's new is already embraced automatically, and it's important to just think a little bit further and question if it's beneficial or not.
Exactly,
sure.
exactly. And to find the ways, I would say, to democratically discuss these points. This is why I said as a philosopher, I didn't want to make negative comments a category by labeling some elements as being negative comments. I can say something is a zombie technology, but I wouldn't say this is essentially a negative comments, because I think this very notion is not a category. It's rather something that should trigger inquiries by collectives and people to decide whether innovations, whether situations they know are or are not positive or negative comments. And it's up to them to, after a democratic inquiry in a kind of Deweyan fashion, to decide whether they're positive or negative comments, and then to find ways to do politics from their starting points. Maybe just very short example. There is an interesting example going on in a city in the United States. It's called Centerville. It's one of the poorest cities in the United States. And this city is somehow becoming unlivable because it's, should I say, all the waste and the waters of this city cannot go somewhere else. This city is absorbing its own waste. And for example, if you flush your toilet in this city, in a lot of in a lot of houses in this city, the dejections will appear in the people's gardens a few seconds after. And so it's really making the city unlivable. It's becoming a truly horrific place, and the experience of the people living there is something to hear. And this situation, due to the fact that all the cities surrounding it are blocking the possibility of having the waste of the city, circulating. And that's a very interesting, that's a horrible situation. It's a very interesting one from the perspective of the negative comments, because we can see that these people cannot deal with this problem by themselves. If it's just, a comments that they have to deal with, this is the definition of the positive comments, the situation will worsen over time. So the question now is how we make this negative comments the problem of all the cities surrounding it, and they have to share the same problem in order to find a solution. So new means of solidarity, which is not just advocating an abstract value, it's what I will call forceful solidarity. You have to become, you have to make this problem your problem as well. Leave us alone dealing with that kind of problem. And I think we can extend the reasoning to many, many issues that we are witnessing right now.
Super interesting. Someone has any question? Otherwise, I will wrap up. Let's see. Probably no. Thank you so much, Alexandre. It was super interesting to hear all this. I'm thinking a lot about many ideas, but now we have to wrap up our talk. And yeah, there are many other talks and events in the summit. So if you're interested in checking, you can pass. Well, I'll put the website here. Where is it? Yeah, Gaudin already did. Ciao, everyone. Have a good day. Ciao, ciao.
Thanks again.